So hello, this is Margrit. I'm really pleased and happy to have a special guest for this interview today. This is Steve Gallegos from New Mexico, and he's the founder of the DeepImagery work. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Margrit.
Thank you very much for being here and opening space for this interview.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. And actually we are here at Gut Frohberg, near Meissen, celebrating the Festival of the Animals 2017. And this is a gathering, an annual international gathering of friends and practitioners of the DeepImagery work. So we have 5 days of different workshops, and it's just a gathering, which is really nice. Maybe you would like to say what this festival means to you.
This is actually, I think, the 27th year that we've held the festival. And it's a very international festival. One of the beautiful things about it is that people come from all kinds of different cultures and languages and settings and so on. And they meet here at a deep, deep level, which is the level of just being human together. And that's a very, very beautiful level. That is what really enriches the heart. The other stuff, we realize we've learned it along the way, but there's something very deep inside of each one of us that is just natural, alive, beautiful, and present. And so when these dimensions meet here, you see that there really is hope in the world for people coming home to who they are and living from that place, rather than living in terms of nations or particular walks in life or jobs or accumulations, anything like that, that people are most content just being human together and honoring that richness.
Wow, sounds nice. And coming home to yourself, it's what the DeepImagery work is about.
That's what it's about.
In its essence.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I would like to invite you to talk a little bit about the DeepImagery work. You're a psychologist, you studied psychology.
Yes.
What made you leave the conventional way of psychology, of being a therapist, and what made you discover the DeepImagery, and what does it mean, DeepImagery, to you?
Margrit, I studied psychology for many years and was a professor of psychology, chairman of a psychology department, and I always felt there was something missing in it. I studied the whole scientific approach to psychology. And it's valid in itself, but we forget that there are deeper levels of knowing and of being present and deeper levels of who we are. And so if we're going to study the scientific orientation, we're limited to a very narrow level, which is the level of being able to put something into words, being able to measure something, being able to compare things and so on, and having more than one person having the same experience. When you come into deep imagination, we come into a place where each person's uniqueness appears. And each person is really deeply, uniquely creative at that level. That's the level of the well from which our aliveness springs forth. And it's a level of fundamental original creativity. And it's the level where when we meet at that place with each other, we present each other with our riches. It's like our treasure house comes forth, and if we share that with each other, we appreciate each other, and we recognize, wow, at this level, we are all deeply intelligent, deeply creative, deeply knowledgeable, because the knowing at that level of the deep imagination comes from the experience of aliveness itself. And we forget the fact that the life that exists in me has a prior history that goes back for billions of years. And it's only been in my personal life for 83 years, a little bit more than that right now. But the life itself has a knowing and an experiencing that is ancient. And when we step into the level of our deep imagination, we tap into that ancientness and the wisdom that's there and the knowing that is there beyond measurement and beyond comparison, and uniquely so. And each one of us is a fountain of that knowing. And when we share from that place, we're just beautifully creative together and appreciative of each other, and there is no comparison, and there is no competition at that level, because everybody is appreciated exactly for who they are. And so it's not a matter of saying I'm better than someone else. Everybody is where they are, who they are, and it's beautiful. The meeting then is at this place of aliveness, and not at a place of accomplishment or achievement or how much money we've earned in our lives or what kind of an education we have. That is very, very secondary, if it matters at all. And so the beauty of the deep imagery work, you see, we have different levels of knowing. And we function so much in terms of thinking, because thinking is directly related to the way we communicate. And right now we wouldn't be making this video if we didn't communicate. So what the video is showing is our communication. But communication is there to point toward something. A word in itself is not the thing that it's about. Okay? The word is never the thing. And so when we talk in terms of words, we're talking in terms of things that are not necessarily present right now. And we point at them, and the things I point at, you can have some kind of a knowing of them also from your experience. And if we speak the same language, then we connect in a certain way. But if we only connect from the level of the intellect, then we connect from the level of what we've learned and the books we've read and the ideas that we know. And that limits us, because we are deeper than ideas. We are deeper than concepts. And so we can speak from another level, which would be the level of feeling, emotion, knowing instinctively things about animals, about these birds that are singing, about the grass that's growing here, about trees and flowers, because we experience them. And so knowing from that level of direct experience. And then when we go into the level of the deep imagination, there is the level of this ancientness that's there. It's like an ancient knowing that is the knowing of aliveness itself. And that knowing is profound. And we are taught that that's not possible. You know, there have been philosophers very recently who said the only thing in the mind is what's come in through the senses. And that's ridiculous. We are born with things that we know. And every child knows those things. And every child loves to bring them forth and let them mature and display them and show them and tell stories about them. And we start condemning children for one thing, saying possibly, oh, you're lying, or that's not true, or you don't know if that's the case or not, or today what we say is, oh, that hasn't been scientifically proven. And so we enter doubts into a place that needs to be respected. And we should learn to respect the depth of who we are and to live forth from that place. And that's what's missing today in many cultures.
I'm an anthropologist. So
beautiful.
You can imagine that I'm curious in what way, like you have Indian roots, right?
Yes.
Like your grandmother was Navajo?
My grandmother, it's hard to know what tribe she came from.
Yeah.
Possibly Pueblo, could be Apache. We really don't know.
Oh, you never met her?
I did meet her. I lived with her. But she didn't know. She had been uprooted. You see, a lot of the Indians there had been uprooted. They had served in the houses of the Spaniards as servants and as slaves and so on. And sometimes while they were serving, they only had to serve for 7 years and then they were freed, which was very nice. Unlike the slaves that had existed on the East Coast. And so when some of the Indians were freed then, the villages where they had lived before have disappeared. If they were all enslaved and put in different places, and then they're freed, suddenly they don't know what to come, they have nothing to come back to. And so it's, for a lot of the Indians that had been enslaved like that, new communities were formed which were of a mixture of different tribes. And she grew up in a place in Tomé, New Mexico, which was a place that was one of those villages of the mixed tribes. And there are a number of them around New Mexico. And the Spaniards had placed them very specifically on the outskirts of the places where they lived because the really wild Indians that were there, that were pretty murderous, would come in and attack these communities. And the first line of defense was, of course, these constituted villages that had been formed then by the Spaniards. And that's really where my grandparents came from. So I don't know what tribe they came from. Okay. There's a number of possibilities. Either Pueblo, possibly Navajo, possibly Apache. And there are a number of different kinds of Pueblo Indians also. So I really don't know the origin there. My mother was of English and Irish descent. And so I'm kind of a curious mixture myself.
And your father was Spanish?
He was basically, he grew up in the Spanish culture. Okay, but he was Indian.
Do you have a feeling, like a sensing of how did these roots like influence your work and your life, or doesn't it matter? Or do you have like a feeling of there was an influence because of my Indian roots, maybe?
You know, I was always a very wild little kid. I know that now.
I imagine.
And I got punished tremendously for my wildness.
Okay.
Really, very painfully punished. And so I drew back and contained myself for a good part of my life. And it is the deep imagination then that opened me up to trusting once again those instincts and natural tendencies that come through who I am. Things that I didn't have to learn, but that I am. And that's true for every human being. There are dimensions that they fundamentally are, which they have not learned. And that's the place where we meet the most profoundly.
Good for you. You met the deep imagery work. In what moment or in what place, inside place in your life did this come to you?
It saved my life. I realized later that I'd been searching all my life for something that made sense in who I was. Okay?
Like everyone, I guess.
Like everyone. We search for who we are, and we long for that being. We long for that person that we truly are down at the core of who we are. We long for that center of our wholeness that can then sustain us and hold us together, and that is profoundly related to all the rest of the universe and everything else that lives and everything else that exists. We are related from that deep place in who we are. The relationship is there, it's natural, and it's profound. And yet, when we grow up, when we are trained to be people of a particular culture, those roots are usually cut. So that we're taught, oh, we have to be like everybody else, we have to speak the same language that everybody else speaks. And if you go to school, you're naturally compared to other students in terms of being graded, in terms of what you can learn. And we are shifted then from being rooted in our being to people trying to connect us to the things we've learned. And we consider that to be a cultured person. But we need those roots that are natural to who we are. And then we can learn what we need to learn to get along in the world. It doesn't have to be this thing of going to a school that's set up like a factory where everybody is trained in the same way and expected to accomplish similar things. We need to really come back to trusting the person in their inherent presence and aliveness.
This is also that C.G. Jung also was trying with his work because he already worked with imagery, right?
Yes, and it scared the hell out of him too. When he met his deep imagination, he was terrified of it a lot of the times. And it was very profound. And to read his notes is very fascinating because your imagery tries to bring you back to your wholeness. And if we try to stay clinging to the culture, we oppose that wholeness by saying, oh no, I need to remain a scientific person or something else. And there are places in Jung's writings where he meets with his deep imagination and they say different things to him. Like he meets one person who's totally red and he says, oh, you're the devil. And this person says, I'm not the devil. He says, yes, you're red, therefore you're the devil. And so there's kind of this intellectual imposition of a knowing on this other person. That's just not true for him. And Jung doesn't listen to him and ask him, oh, well, how come you're red then? You know, he doesn't inquire. He makes his judgment and imposes it on dimensions of his own imagination. And this is one of the difficulties, I think, that he had, certainly early in his life. There are other things that they try to do with him. He meets a woman, and they say, you need to love this woman. And he says, oh, I can never love her. She did evil things, and she's horrible, and I could never love her. And they say, no, you need to learn to love her. And he said, no, I couldn't. And so there's rejection of what the imagery is trying to bring him to within himself. There's another place where his imagery says to him, you are interested in us only because you want to write about us. You know, and that's very fascinating because that's exactly what he wanted to do. And it's true. And that's what he was interested in. He wanted to substantiate this and write it down as facts. And what they were trying to do was say, come home to the depths of your own profound wholeness and live from that place rather than from this educated place that you've learned to come to in your life. Okay? So they really tried to deepen him. And I think they did ultimately in his long life, and it was good. But the things he writes about, which were, he hid them, and then his family hid them for 50 years after he died. Because some people said, oh, this is psychosis. This is the imagery coming forth and being crazy. And so we look, it's curious how we've done this. We take that original spontaneous knowing that comes forth in images, and we say, if you go too profoundly into that, that means you're crazy. So we diagnose people based upon wherefrom they retrieve their knowing within themselves. And it's sad because what the imagery is trying to do is say, hey, you have lost connection with your wholeness. Come back home to it. And in order to come home to it, you have to face these other things that you've come to, which you do systematically and almost obsessively and compulsively. And you've gotten lost in these things that you feel you just have to do, because you don't just have to do them, but you have to know how and where they fit in your life and let them take their proper position. So there is a readjustment that the deep imagination tries to bring forth in us, a reorganizing of the different qualities of who we are, so that we are properly integrated within. And a lot of therapists, rather than trying to help the person move into this integration, because the person is really drawn into the integration, but they have to face, for example, the pain they've experienced in their lives, the loss, the resentment they may have felt, the anger at having been forced in a certain direction. Here's culture itself facing us over there. And so the imagination wants our wholeness, wants us to grow fully and deeply and root ourselves again in our presence here. And a lot of the ideas and concepts we have about people keep us at a level that is non-integrated and where we are not whole. We function okay socially, and that seems to be the primary purpose. That society demands that we fit into it in a certain way, but then society itself gets very twisted and does crazy things, like the presence of wars in our world. War should be outlawed completely, totally. There should be no reason for war anymore. And to think that the most educated countries in the world are the ones that are so into warring is ridiculous. They should be the ones that are trying the most to mature into the profound beings that they are. So culture needs to change. And it can't change from the outside. It has to change from the inside, individually in each person. And that, since I first met my own deep imagination, has been my orientation in the world. I help people grow deeply into who they truly are. And when they do that, they're Perfectly trustworthy. Deeply trustworthy.
Trustworthy.
Trustworthy, yes.
Authentic.
Authentic. And powerful.
Like C.G. Jung, if I understood it right, he just dived into his imagery,
Actually,
but he didn't establish like a true communication.
His imagery came
Right?
and grabbed him from the time he
Okay.
was a child and scared the hell out of him. He had these images that didn't make sense in his life. Like he had one of the early images he writes about that really scared him was he sees the church, and his father was a pastor, the head of a church. And above the church, he sees God's ass. And God is shitting on the church. And it scared the hell out of him. Oh my God, what is this? Am I going crazy or what? And he was having, his imagination was saying to him, look, the building of a church and all of this ritual and ceremony and forcing people to conform, especially in Europe at that time. You have to remember that the last witch that was burnt in Switzerland was burnt not even 100 years before Jung was born. And so there was still that fear there of the church saying, you don't conform, and therefore we're going to burn you at the stake. We'll judge you, we'll determine who you are, and we'll punish you for that. If the church could do that, it was pretty scary. And so this is one of the strong things that moved people to conform, because you can imagine this group of people who were very powerful together, group of men particularly, coming, knocking at your door and saying, tell me about your imagery. Oh, it's all about this good and Jesus and all of this stuff. You know? Okay, then you're okay. Or they knock on the door and they say, tell me about your imagery. And the little girl runs up and says, wow, I dreamed there was this person here with a tail and he was red and he had horns. Oh, you've been in with the devil, you know. And I mean, we have verified and validated situations of children 5 years old being burnt at the stake, which is insane. I mean, we have been through our insanity with people in collusion with each other, trying to determine how other people should be, and killing them if they're not, if they don't conform to the expectations of this group of people. This is insanity.
Yes. You said you are guiding people to this deep place inside.
Yes.
Trying to guide these
Yes.
people into their wholeness, to this deep, deep knowing inside. How do you do this?
First of all, people have to go beyond their thinking. Okay? And they have to be willing to face whatever arises deep within themselves. And by facing, I don't mean they have to just accept it and say, this is who I am, but they have to be present with it and engage with it in a relationship. The deep part of who we are needs to have a relationship with the part of us that has learned to talk and to see, to look and to see and to be present with other people. So what we've lost is the inner connection to the depths of who we are. And instead we have connected to other people and to society and to conforming and obeying. Okay? And we need to reconnect to those roots of our own aliveness. Aliveness is ancient. Aliveness is beautifully intelligent. Aliveness is creative. And we each are the carriers of this tremendous gift of aliveness, each person. And that's what we need to root ourselves in and to trust it, and to say aliveness can be trusted. Okay? Once we recognize that, then we're coming back home to who we are, from our very origins. Okay? What has happened socially is that we've been forced to cut those roots and to connect socially in terms of what other people think we should do or think we should say or how we should be. And so we've tried to set up a level of connection that is socially validated rather than one that is individually recognized and appreciated and honored. And that doesn't mean we're going to go out and do wild and crazy things. We do wild and crazy things when we've been disconnected from who we are.
Yes.
That's the craziness.
Yes.
So, what I do is I have people close their eyes, lie down and relax, and the relaxing is so they can become present in this moment, now. Not thinking about tomorrow, not worried about yesterday, not concerned with, oh, how do I look to other people and things like that, but to be present here with, this is what I'm experiencing. Okay? We are so used to the visual, that is to seeing, that we think if we don't see something, it doesn't exist. And so all of the things that exist that are not immediately visible, we tend to deny and say, oh, can you see that over there? Oh, no, you can't? Okay. Then we doubt if it exists. But there's some people who see things that other people don't. And what we learn is that our feelings influence what we see. And what we see is there for a certain reason to help us grow bigger than we've been. So the person lies down on the floor, typically. They can also sit up or even stand up. They close their eyes. I say to them, connect with the earth, connect with the sky, recognize that you're breathing, feel your body, be present to all that exists right now in terms of your awareness, and then summon an animal. And I work typically with animals. Call an animal out of your heart, okay, and let it appear in your imagination. And so immediately then an animal comes. Some people are frustrated because a white mouse might appear, and they say, oh, I don't want a mouse, I want a lion. I want to have the heart of a lion. Okay? This is something other than the roots of our aliveness. If a white mouse appears, that's who we need to engage with. And we need to say, hello, white mouse. Why are you coming out of my heart? I was hoping for a lion. And the white mouse say, your lion has been caged for many years. I'm here to lead you to your lion and help free it. So there's a development then that happens. And the person goes with the white mouse on this and discovers aspects of who they are that have been confined or buried or limited or rejected. Okay? So we begin to gather then the other alivenesses that we are. We think, and this is one of our difficulties, we think we're alive. Okay? We are alive, but we think, oh, I am alive. Our thinking would be better off to say, there are many different alivenesses in me, and I can feel them in different ways, in different situations, on different occasions. And wow, these alivenesses need to gather together so that they can function as a single unity. And this is what I call wholeness. When these alivenesses are gathered together, then there is more potential, many more different possibilities for me in any situation, because I trust that the aliveness that needs to come forth in that situation will present itself, do what it needs to do, and then come back to rejoin the alivenesses. The other alivenesses support the one that's going forth and doing what needs to be done. But it's not me doing it. It's me giving space and trusting that the aliveness that needs to be present will be present, do its best, and doesn't need to then cling to the limelight after that. We have the culture today, especially in America, the culture of fame. The better known I am, the more successful I am. And that's not the case at all. The most successful person is the person who is most deeply at home with who they are and who embraces the totality of their potential. And potential is power. And when you have your totality, then you have a center that's true. And when you have a center that's true, you have a place at home in yourself. And then you don't need to seek that place through someone else or through a certain kind of activity or through becoming a certain kind of person. You're just at home in who you are and deeply content. And so this is the route that people take in working with the deep imagination, that they come more and more to be at home with who they are, to trust who they are, to recognize talents that they may not even have known were there, and to honor those talents and let them show themselves, but without having to be stuck on that as kind of a social facade or a social thing that needs to be presented over and over again because other people say, oh, that's great. You know, the person can just be funny or hilarious or ridiculous or whatever. It's not a matter of appearance then. It's a matter of presence and being. And this is what we've been lacking for too long, culturally, especially in the Western world. We don't have an adequate theory of what it is to be psychologically healthy. Okay?
We don't.
No, we don't. And we are not a theory in the first place. You know?
Yes.
We're a deep aliveness. And so whatever theories we describe, they're just descriptions. They're like stories we tell about possibilities. The actuality is in the movement toward the full presence of who we are and the trust of that. Look at the beautiful butterflies over there. Each one of those butterflies is beautifully alive and has its own knowing. And look how they go from flower to flower, so light, so present, so beautifully trusting. And they're here for a short while, they do what they're here to do, and then they move on. And we're kind of the same way. We're here for a short while, we're here to grow the way we're to grow, to do what we're here to do, and then we move on. And the full dimension of that experience is a beautiful passageway. I'm 83 years old. I'll be dying eventually, and I look forward to dying. I've waited my whole life for dying, you could say. My whole life has led me toward dying. Why shouldn't I appreciate it when it's finally there and embrace it as fully as I can and really respect the experience of it? It may be something awesome. Other than the experience, all we have is ideas about it and ideas from the outside of other people who have died.
Sometimes you die even through your deep imagination. That also happens once in a while, right?
Yes, I've died a few times.
I imagine.
And each time I've died, something in me has been let go of. Something that I was clinging to. And then when something is let go of that you cling to, there's more room for other things. And that's the way we grow. We shed these things we cling to like a snake sheds its skin. And then there's more room for a new snake with a bigger skin.
I like what you say sometimes when someone is feeling like dying and some people think they need to suicide themselves. Then you,
That's
what
tragic,
do you say?
Yeah. I say, ask inside, what part of you is ready to die now? Because it's not our totality. It's just one part. And it's time for it to die. And it dies so that something else new can come and have a presence in us. There are things we've learned to do as children, and some of those things need to die. We learn to protect ourselves and to defend ourselves emotionally in a certain way. And there comes a time when it's time for that just to let go. And then we step forth and we can live in a more mature way. A lot of cultures don't know that, and so they cling to those childhood dimensions that they think are truly who they are, when in fact what they were survival strategies, the only way we knew how to survive at the time when we were small and we were threatened. But we don't have to cling to them the rest of our lives.
You said you call animals.
Yes.
Why animals?
Yes.
Why animals?
I don't really know why it's animals. They just kind of show up. My sense is that it's because animals, in our entire experience, animals have the most varied dimensions of aliveness that we know. If we look around at the world, we know of nothing that has such a variety of alivenesses as the realm of animals. Somebody asked me once, why don't we just see rocks instead of animals? That's fine,
Flowers.
You may see rocks, but rocks aren't nearly as alive as animals. And what they're trying to portray to us is the different dimensions of our aliveness. And they bring them to us and show us, you have the aliveness of a tiger, and you have the aliveness of a little kitten, and you have the aliveness of a snake, and you have the aliveness of a mythological animal, and you have the aliveness of a fly. And each one of those has its value. I remember the first time I ever met a fly on one of my journeys. I hadn't expected a fly, and suddenly here was this fly. And I said, wow, a fly? A fly isn't even an animal, it's an insect. I said, how come you're here? And the fly said to me, let yourself merge into me. And so I merged into the fly, and when I was in the fly, it was awesome. The fly was full of space, and its eyes were like these multicolored windows in a cathedral, these faceted eyes. Light was shining in through them, and the fly showed me, look, I can fly up, I can fly backwards, I can fly sideways, I can fly down. I'm totally maneuverable. I can fly in any direction I want. Even a bird can't do that. And I'm full of space. And it was like being in a cathedral inside of that fly. And I felt, oh my God, this is a magnificent being. And we treat it as this little thing that we can swat and kill without thinking about it. And yet this is a living being. It has its own qualities. And I haven't gotten to know those qualities because I only look at it from the outside. Deep imagination allows me to experience it from the inside. And then it's a whole different picture. And that's what we've lost in our tendency to be overly scientifically oriented, because science demands objectivity. And that means we have to look at something as an object rather than as a subject. The deep imagination allows us the subjectivity of the experience of anything at all that exists. And many things that don't exist.
So what if someone does not have any imagery? If you guide someone and there is no imagery,
Okay.
like call your animal of your heart, and nothing comes.
Yeah. First of all, there is always something happening. And if it's not imagery, that's an interesting question. Why does not imagery come to this person? I've worked with some people whose imagery has been so squashed and buried and hidden that it's not immediately available. They've been punished for sharing their imagery, and they've been called liars or whatever, and that happens to a lot of children, because we say, you're not telling the truth, when the child is just sharing its imagination. And we say, no, you have to tell the truth, you have to be honest. We have these ideas about what a child should be, rather than getting to know the child itself. Okay? So we have this strange thing of experiencing the world as an object. And that's our whole philosophical orientation today, the scientific orientation. Deep imagination allows us to experience something from its inside. And when we do that, we gain a whole different recognition of what the world is about and what it's like.
It would be interesting to connect more the scientific world, the academic world, with imagery.
It would be, except that the scientific world is built on doubt and negation. What it relies on is to say, this isn't true. We'll do an experiment to either prove it or disprove it. Okay, it's disproved.
It's like a sport also.
Is it? Tell me.
It seems to me.
Yeah?
Like doubting and proving and not proving, and someone says something and another one says, no, that's not true. It's a little bit like a sport and a lot of competition.
Interesting. Oh, yes, definitely.
This is how I receive it,
Yes.
perceive it.
Definitely competition.
There are lots of values, of course. I also study it and things.
That's right. You're a
this is
scientist
what
yourself,
I
Yes.
perceive.
And I was trained as a scientist
It's a
too.
little bit of sport
Yes.
also.
And there's something missing in that realm. What's missing is the depth of our own aliveness.
And feeling.
And feeling. And knowing from a place where things can't be proven and shouldn't need to be proven, but should be at least heard and listened to and recognized as, this is the person's experience.
But Einstein did know.
Einstein did know?
he was working different. There were scientists that knew about imagery,
Yes,
the value of imagery.
And that imagery led a lot of scientists in the direction they went, which was very fine. But how many people have stepped directly into imagery itself and explored it? Not many, because it's scary. You're taken into places, the place of your fear, for example.
How did you find that door?
The door?
The door to really, truly explore imagery.
My own animals came to me spontaneously one day when I was jogging. And they were the animals from the different levels of my aliveness that the Hindus call the chakras. And I don't like the term chakra because it is from a different culture. I prefer the term aliveness. Okay? And so we have different alivenesses that line the core of this body, that are arranged there. And what I experienced was there was a different animal in each one, and immediately these animals started showing me where I had my deepest injury. And they took me immediately to that deep injury in a very easy way. And they healed the injury with very little effort. And I was just there flabbergasted watching them, because I realized I hadn't remembered or even thought about this injury for about 50 years. Okay? And yet they were showing me this injury is here. Okay? And the injury was the fact that when I was 5 years old, I had started school in kindergarten, and I liked kindergarten. And suddenly the teacher took me out of kindergarten after I'd been in it for 2 weeks and put me in the first grade because she thought I was intelligent. I wasn't, of course. I was alert, and I could speak, and I could verbalize. And I spoke English, whereas most of the kids in the class spoke Spanish. And put me in the first grade. And I didn't want to be in the first grade. The kindergarten had 12 kids in it that were all my friends. First grade had 30 kids in it. They were all bigger and older than me, and I hardly knew them. So I felt I don't belong here. And that feeling of not belonging was very deep in me. I didn't want to be there. And what happened with these chakra animals, they took me and showed me, look, the feeling is still there. And the feeling has been there every time you've entered a new classroom. You go into the classroom and you feel, I shouldn't be here. And so what they displayed to me was, you have been experiencing the world through this feeling that you got stuck in. And everything that's happened around school, you see it through the feeling and feel, I don't belong here. Okay? And yet somehow you've continued on through school, through a PhD, feeling that way, I don't belong here. Okay? And so what they did was they healed that feeling immediately in a very simple way. And it left me. And I realized, oh my God, I've been carrying this feeling as a lens through which I've seen the world my entire life. And suddenly it's gone. This lens is gone. It's like a schleier, what do you call it? What's a schleier?
Like something covers. I don't know what is schleier in English.
A lens has been removed from my vision so I can see more clearly now. Not in terms of past injuries, but in terms of presence, being present.
Clarity, yeah.
And so I was amazed, and I realized these animals know more than I do about myself. I didn't remember that I had been injured that way. If I had, I didn't know what to do about it. They remembered it, they showed it to me, and they removed the injury easily with no fuss. And I said, they are the therapists. I'm not a therapist. They know me better than I know myself. They know how I function. They're the ones I need to learn from. And so I started learning from them and immediately started helping other people meet these animals also. And the animals are very beautiful. You know, there had been books showing animals in the chakras, very old books, but they had a specific animal in each chakra that was like a fixed point. And I think this is one of our problems. Somebody experiences something and they think, oh, everybody else is the same way I am. That's not true. You know? People are different. And because I experience something, that doesn't mean everybody's the same. But I started helping people meet this part of the imagination, and it started healing them right away, very quickly. And I realized I had to bring this out into the world. It was given to me not just for me to heal and grow, but so that the world could start healing. And healing has to happen individually. We think healing can happen in mass, in groups and so on. But it happens very uniquely, individually, in each person. And that's where we need to start, helping each person heal and grow and mature, and helping these alivenesses work together as a unity. Because in many cases, some of the alivenesses are divided against other alivenesses, culturally so. That is, we think, because there's a big anger in my belly, and what I've learned is, no, I'm supposed to be loving and caring. There's a clash here. There's an opposition. So these two elements need to somehow resolve their differences. They know how to do that in the deep imagination.
It's about trusting.
Yes. They come together and they work out their differences and come to a place of resolution. And then they can work together in harmony rather than in opposition. And what a lot of us have learned in our childhood is to oppose certain things that are very natural parts of who we are, natural alivenesses. Or sometimes we've been deeply injured, and so there's a rage in us against having been injured. And that rage is a tremendous power. But that power needs to come back and fill out the rest of who we are, rather than remain as a rage with a specific orientation.
This is what we experience at the moment in the world, and I feel like it's growing, like craziness is growing, and all this rage, it's getting higher. Do you think there's hope?
I think there's tremendous hope. I think people have gotten stuck in their thinking. They judge, they conceptualize, they believe their ideas more than they try to grow into their wholeness and their maturity. So a lot of people that are stuck at places of childhood injury. And that's what we're seeing right now. Yes, I think there's tremendous hope, because I work with people constantly, and there is a hunger to grow. There's a hunger to become whole. There's a hunger to come into the being that we know we are, because we were that from the very beginning when we were born. And part of us still remembers that. And that pulls us back. That draws us into our wholeness and into our maturity. And it's a beautiful thing. I love the work that I do, because people blossom like flowers. So it's like working in a beautiful garden where there's the deepest possible blossoming. People are more beautiful than any garden. Lovely, deeply lovely, inside and caring for each other once they've come home to being at home in who they are and trusting. And then there's the trust of others. If we're not whole inside, we don't recognize wholeness on the outside.
So many people really searching. Also, there are lots of people who are trying to create communities now, because they feel and we see that society cannot go on like it is. So a lot of people are looking for solutions in creating communities, but a lot of communities don't survive. So I don't know how to set this question. I can borrow it. I can cancel this also, but
that's good.
I can cut it. But I wanted to lead to the workshop you did on Saturday about community and connection, because this is such an important theme to create communities in a healthy way, in an authentic way, so that everyone really can be who he or she is and still be in contact with community and work together.
I think there are two needs at work there, both of which are very deep. One is the need to live with other people, naturally. Yes. That's a deep need we have. We are people of the tribe. We are people of community. We are people that belong together. We inspire each other. We support each other. We love each other. We care for each other. There's nothing more beautiful than a newborn baby and watching that baby grow, as we had here. You know, new children, lovely. One of them your daughter. Who's a lovely, lovely young lady. So we have the need to belong together that we feel very deeply. We were born into families, and we had to be cared for by the family. Okay? And so there's that need to return to the big family. The second need is the need to become whole inside. Okay, so those are two different needs. People come together to form community, but they don't quite know how to help each other come to that place of being whole within who they are individually. And so my experience is when you start coming home to being whole individually, you are naturally drawn to community and to being with other people and caring deeply about other people. And if we start the other way around, forming community, again in community, the people who are not whole within themselves, the opposition that they carry inside, they're going to find outside. Because we have a tendency to project. That is, to see out there what we're unwilling to see when it's inside. And so the inner healing needs to happen, and it can happen in community. And the two coincide very well when they're going in the same direction. One of the things we have now is community, which we call cities, which really are not kinds of community, but people living alone together. Okay? And that's not community. Community is when people share. And what we have today is people saying, oh, this is mine, that's yours, don't take mine, you know, and fighting with each other over ownership. In a real community, ownership is shared. Whatever's mine, you're welcome to use it freely. I'm happy if you can use it when I'm not using it. That's beautiful. And so sharing is a natural thing. But if our living together is based upon ownership, and we have modern culture which has been built on ownership for a good while, but in light of the length of the time human beings have been around, it's not really that long. So we could easily come back out of the ownership thing, although in many cases it is supported nationally at the level of nations. And that's our difficulty. When the nation says our theoretical orientation is that things should belong to individuals or to certain groups rather than being shared, that's the problem. And that disorganizes community rather than helping community come together. So we need two things. We need a place people can live together, like this lovely place, and we also live together when they want to. Living together should not be a forced thing. A person sometimes needs to be alone. And we need to have that capacity when it's needed to be alone, to go into a retreat, you know, to go on a vision quest, or become a hermit for a while, and then to come back to community. So we learn things by being alone, and we learn things also by returning to community. We need that, but we also need the inner orientation of healing the inner community. That is this population of alivenesses that each one of us carries inside. That's also a community. And if the inner community isn't together, the outer community can't be together.
Sounds great.
And I know you're oriented toward community and helping community gather and be built. And especially, I think, when there are children involved, children receive so much from community. They need other people around. They need to learn from other people. They can't just learn from their parents. Each one of us is limited. But when you have a lot of different people, there are a lot of different orientations, and the child soaks that up.
Yes. It's the African saying, no? That a child, to grow up a child, it needs a whole village. Not only the core family.
Yes, yes. And instead of villages, we've built cities.
These children say they would like to just stay here and live here.
I can
The
believe
children
they
at the
would.
festival.
So would I. This child
Actually,
would
me
like
too.
to also.
Maybe we could just stay.
Yes. No, this is the way to live.
Anything else you would like to share?
Thank you for
think
your
is really
work.
important?
I appreciate your work very much. Your work in anthropology, your studies, your travels, and how much you've gained and brought back to Western culture, out of the Indian cultures that you've visited in Central and South America.
Thank you.
It's very beautiful. And I hope you keep writing your lovely books and keep supporting the beautiful children that you're around. And trusting the way you have a natural tendency to hold community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know, DeepImagery saved my life. I told it to you many times, but it's true.